So as we head into the 5th week of the Rugby Championship, one of the New Zealand news outlets has raised a pretty good point, and that's about yellow cards. There's a lack of them in this year's competition. I'll put the link to the actual article in the description, but it mainly talks about the fact that when you look at the card stats for this year compared to the previous two and beyond, this year's cards are startlingly low. So you look at 2016, 15 yellow cards, no red cards. Australia led the way with yellow cards that year. All Blacks second, South Africa third, Argentina fourth. 2017, I mean, you're dropping 5 yellow cards, but adding to that 2 red cards. Argentina led the way, All Blacks again second, South Africa again third. This time Australia with no cards, at least yellow cards from memory. And then you look at this year. I know we've still got 2 weeks to go, but for this number to catch up to these numbers, as the article kind of points out, there would have to be a brawl with multiple send-offs or something kind of dramatic. So it kind of begs the question, why? What's going on? Is rugby no longer kind of going soft, which is what a lot of guys have, at least over the Super Rugby season, they've been kind of accusing the game, especially the guys like Brad Thorne, who's a traditional, rugby union hard man and rugby league hard man. He likes a good tackle. He often talks in his press conferences about watching MMA and kind of getting inspiration from that, and wonders why when guys are allowed to beat the snot out of each other in an MMA fight, why we can't tackle hard or whatnot in rugby union. But yeah, so you got to wonder what's changed. I mean, I guess there's a couple of things. It could be players are finally kind of adapting their technique. I mean, we've been at it a long time for, when you see these high shots, you say, well, it's probably a bit harsh, but with the way the game's being refereed now, you know that a high shot like that is going to get you a card, so don't do it. Maybe teams are finally starting to get the idea. I listened to a news article from that Irish radio show, but on YouTube, Off the Ball, and one of the guys there said basically, he referred to that Sam Warburton tip tackle in the 2011 World Cup, and that was a red card in that game. He basically said that red card was a large part of what stamped tip tackles out of rugby union. It was kind of a very clear message that if you tip tackle, you are going to get red carded. So I guess we could look at these numbers and say perhaps all the messages about don't go high and don't go late and all these things are kind of getting through. Don't be cynical. Either that or, and I think it's perhaps a mix of the two, we're seeing a lot less TMO interference in the games, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, because for large parts of Super Rugby you were seeing the TMO stop play and calling back the referee to stop and have a look at the big screen and review a decision that he perhaps didn't see in real time, asking him to have another look at it, and that automatically puts the pressure on the referee. Is like, if we're stopping the game in front of these 10,000 people, for me to have a look at this in front of all these people, then you obviously think it's worth a card, and if he goes for kind of penalty only or play on, it creates a bit of friction between him and the TMO, because it makes the TMO look a bit silly for stopping the game. Some refs are better at it than others at saying, like, nah, that's nothing, just carry on. But we do seem to be seeing a lot more, at least in this Rugby Championship, more just referee sees it on the field. If he asks the TMO for advice, that's fine, but the TMO is not kind of jumping in when not called upon. And in terms of the flow of the game, that's a very good thing as a fan. There's nothing worse for me here when I'm doing the reviews of games is knowing that I have to talk about some kind of refereeing decision, especially a card or a lack of a card. In one of those decisions, we want to be talking about the game generally, the good plays, the tackles, all those kind of things, not controversial refereeing decisions. If you're not talking about the referee at the end of the game, it's usually a pretty positive outcome. However, you got to wonder a little bit, and if you're a South African fan, you've probably seen stories about this. In New Zealand, we didn't really talk about it. and Australian fans also will have probably talked a little about this. You got to wonder if we've been going a little bit too far the other way, because there was a shot from, and this article that I'll put in the description talks about it, a shot from Kieran Reid onto Francois Lowe in that last game in Wellington, All Blacks against Springboks, where Kieran Reid went for a clean out and pretty much put his shoulder into Francois Lowe's head. And from having reviewed a whole season of Super Rugby, that was a key kind of incident where the TMO goes, check, let's have a look at this, and it ends up invariably with some kind of card. But nothing happened about this. I know, like I said, it's been talked a bit about in the South African media, at least on Twitter from what I've seen, but yeah, it's gotten pretty much no traction here, although in this article it was mentioned. And the Aussies obviously mentioned all those neck rolls on David Pocock. He ended up missing one game against the Boks with neck injuries, largely from him copping some damage in his games against the All Blacks. So there's no doubt other stuff. These are just two incidents where, well, it's New Zealand guys. We often talk about this cloak of invisibility that All Blacks players sometimes get. People argue, I mean, I'm not the right guy to talk about it because I'm an All Blacks fan, but that All Blacks guys can get away with that a little bit more. Kieran Reid's example was a very clear one, but yeah, I'm sure over the games that we have seen this Rugby Championship thus far, non-New Zealand guys have probably done stuff which perhaps if the TMO had been proactive may have been looked at before. So it's not just the Kiwi guys kind of getting away with stuff, but yes, you do have to wonder if they should be looking at stuff after the game, because if you haven't seen that Kieran Reid hit, go have a look on it. If it had been done to Kieran Reid, I feel like us here in New Zealand, we probably would have been a bit outraged, as people will tend to get with some of these things. But 2 yellow cards. In terms of the rugby, great. I'm all for that. It's much better not having stop-start every 5 minutes. As I said, I enjoy not talking about cards and stuff after the game. But do you think stuff is kind of going unpunished because of that? Do you think there's a happy medium? Do you think they're getting it right at the moment? Do you think we need to see more stuff after the game? That's kind of where I'm perhaps sitting a little bit, if I had to kind of pick a position. But yeah, we definitely don't want to be back in those days. I mean, I had a look at the Super Rugby stats. I think there was 127 games of Super Rugby played, and there were 99 yellow cards over that season. So that's 0.8 yellow cards per game, so almost a yellow card every game. That's not exactly what we want to see. This year in Rugby Championship, 0.25 yellow cards per game, so that's a massive drop. What do you guys think explains it? Is it just this lack of TMO interference? Are the players kind of cleaning up their act? Do you think we need to have more policing after the game, kind of let the game play as it is, and then deal with any off the ball stuff afterwards? Or do you, I mean, I know I'm putting my stuff out there, do you like the TMO to be analysing every little bit in the game? So if someone does do a red card offence that the ref misses during the game, do you think the TMO should be calling in his ear to kind of get him off the field in game, so he gets that punishment in game and it affects the result of that game? You guys let me know your thoughts. Like I said, I just thought it was an interesting article. It is a pretty startling drop. But yeah, you guys let me know your thoughts, and I'll talk to you again soon for some previews for this week's games, which I'm looking forward to pretty shortly. Alright guys, see you later.